Welcome back to Marvel Maniac and MCU Aftershow. This is your host, Eric Cicada, aka Mr. Honest, back with you for a special episode. We're covering the entire Sam Raimi Spider-Man trilogy today, and we're doing it with my best friend, Dustin. Okay, he's one of my best friends. I have a few best friends, TJ, Dustin, my brother's in there too. But me and Dustin planned on doing a short conversation about the Spider-Man trilogy. It ended up being the whole episode, and Dustin kind of leads the conversation a little bit, which is really fun for me because I'm always having to kind of steer the ship. So he's steering the ship. Dustin loves these movies. Him, like me, grew up on them. For me, I say it later, it's the golden standard for what a superhero film and franchise should be. I'm really excited for you to hear our conversation. In the meantime, I got a lot planned. I have a good big list of episodes and topics, and we're going to be going all over the sacred timeline. And if you have like an idea or something you want to see or hear from me, you can reach out at marvelmaniacpod@gmail.com or marvelmaniacpod on pretty much all of your social platforms. So Instagram, Twitter, even TikTok. Now, you won't see recent posts from me there yet, but you will soon. And it is my pleasure to be covering Spider-Man, the first big superhero film I saw in theaters, and I remember it clearly. My mom took me, and I'd never seen anything like it. Watching him swing through the sky like that, I wanted to be Spider-Man. And from that moment forward, I always loved Spider-Man. And you know, if you listen, you know this, and if you don't, well, I don't know the comics. Very short attention span. I never got to the comics when I was a kid. Boy, would I like to read them now. But and I will. I'm hoping I will. Also, what do you think of our about 50-minute runtime for an episode? Let me know if you thought maybe this episode could have gone a little bit longer. I could have done something after Dustin and I had a conversation. For me right now, the conversation I had with Dusty covered everything. But I'll always love someone else's opinion if it's constructive. So marvelmaniacpod@gmail.com. Send us your thoughts, and don't be shy. We'll read them on the show. If you don't want it read on the show, just tell me. I appreciate all you listeners coming back, and it's good to be back. I'm going to be very consistent with this. I'm not going to make any promises that I can't keep, but I'm really excited about this podcast right now, and I'm really pumped to talk about Marvel with you guys. Well, without further ado, let's get to the conversation I had with Dustin Baker about the original Sam Raimi Spider-Man Trilogy.
Hello.
Should I just record and start over, or I like having
you don't have to stop recording. You have the power of cutting and editing. You have the technology. Yeah. I didn't imagine you were going to pick up the minute I didn't know you were going to be like, when you're editing this episode, you're going to pick up the minute I'm like, hey, Eric.
Dustin Baker, a.k.a. a BFF of mine, and he's been on the show plenty of times. Welcome back, Dustin.
It's great to be here.
It's good to have you here.
Great to be here to talk about some of my most beloved movies, the Sam Raimi Spider-Man trilogy.
In all its glory.
It's
iconic.
When you told me you were going to be doing an episode about the trilogy, I was immediately, that was the one I honed in on. I was like, okay.
Yeah, you texted me back really fast.
I can talk about the other Marvel movies, pretty easily, but it's the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies that I feel like I have more to talk about.
They're the gold standard of what the MCU has become. So I do have questions written down, but if you just want this to just be a flowing conversation, you can lead the pack on that, my man.
I can open up. I can start with some things.
Go on.
Some general.
Let it roll. I'm leaving all this in the episode.
I guess I can preface this by saying, we were both young when when these movies came out.
Correct.
Right? This, especially number one.
I did see it in theaters. Do you remember?
I remember seeing everyone in theaters.
You saw it in theaters as a kid?
All three, yeah. Blown away.
Woo!
Just in pure awe. And Spider-Man was already my favorite superhero when I was a kid because there was the Amazing Spider-Man show playing on the WB or whatever Saturday morning cartoons. My dad was a huge superhero fan his whole life, so he was he was almost forcing me to watch that stuff as a kid, but obviously I was happy to do it. So he made sure to take me to every Spider-Man movie right when it came out.
Dude, that's so exciting, though.
I know there's some like bias maybe in me because it's like, well, when you're a kid, these things like, they impact you more.
Nostalgia goggles.
There's nostalgia. But I think these movies go beyond that. And
yes.
I mean,
yes.
To start off with Spider-Man 1, Spider-Man 1 like set the stage for every superhero movie since, and I know
absolutely
there's Batman with there's the Batman movie with Jack Nicholson's Joker, and that's Tim Burton doing his own thing. But Batman is so different from like what Marvel movies are.
It's so crazy how many heroes you can have and not one of them be like Batman, because Batman is so cool.
Yeah, Batman is in like his own like category of things. But this first Spider-Man movie, Sam Raimi's Spider-Man, set the stage for like what superhero movies could be in the modern age.
I have that literally written down, dude.
It's iconic in like such in such a big way that you can look back on now, almost 20-ish years later, and see that like we have been following in its footsteps ever since. Like Sam Raimi deserves, I think, so much more credit for being the director that like brought superhero movies into the fold. Suddenly, like Spider-Man was like a household name, where before it was like, oh, comics and like comic book characters are kind of just like their own niche little thing for like nerds or whatever. Now it was like, no, Spider-Man is incredible. You're going to see this movie. Everyone loves Spider-Man. Like it changed the game completely.
Oh my god, it did. And it's not unwarranted. And the movie has aged, I gotta say, pretty great. Like, having just watched it, like, yeah, you could tell they're using CGI in the part where, like, I don't know, he's like going to kill the guy who killed his uncle. But really, some of these sequences, like the one at the end of the movie, he's just flying as Spider-Man through the city. And, like, it's literally a 40-second sequence of him flying through the city, through traffic. And that's what got me. You know what I mean? That's, like...
Oh, it's so good. Sam Raimi was probably the perfect director in a lot of ways, because he likes to do things as practical as he can. So, like, talking about the final battle between him and Green Goblin in, like, this warehouse, it's just two people fighting, It's not some giant, like, there's a laser that's going to destroy the world. It's just two people fighting each other, and it's brutal, and, like, the walls are falling down, like, the set is all realistic. And he uses a combination of, like, CGI and, like, real, practical effects. And I think it elevates them to a way that it's like, oh my god, this is so much more charming, because I'm not just like seeing just fake things blowing up on screen. It feels like more personal. It feels grounded and brutal. That fight at the end is so brutal, especially like obviously.
Oh my god!
I remember being a kid like, oh my god.
But there's this moment where like the Goblin is so super strong, as we see in Spider-Man No Way Home way later. Like this, like the serum he does is like a super soldier serum, and we see how strong Tobey is by like, well, what he can basically do and take. I think that their stories in this movie perfectly mirror each other, and I think that's what another really special thing. Like right when he gets his powers, Spider-Man gets his. Like the Green Goblin, William Dafoe, one of the best supervillains on screen, in my opinion. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I will say I think everyone in that first movie does their part impeccably. I do think Tobey Maguire and Willem Dafoe stand out, but like Willem Dafoe brings exactly the right amount of energy to that character. Like he understands the movie right away, and I think if he did just a little bit more, it might come off as a little bit hammy or just like a little too like, oh, this feels corny.
Yeah,
but he nails it. He plays it just right, and obviously to this day, people still think of him as Green Goblin. Like it's an iconic role, and he's such a great actor that he just he brought a whole new level to like what a supervillain could be in a movie.
I love
Tobey
him.
Maguire is Peter Parker for me. He'll always be Peter Parker. Everybody that comes after him will always be compared to Tobey Maguire, just like anyone who will play Iron Man in the future will be compared to Robert Downey Jr. I think Tobey Maguire nailed the like.
No,
like I like Andrew Garfield and I like Tom Holland quite a bit. I think they all bring their own thing to it, but to me, Tobey Maguire nailed the like, I'm a nerd who just got superpowers, and everything that's going to happen to me feels like fitting for someone who was a nerd and now is like supposed to be a superhero. Where like Tom Holland, he's extremely handsome, he's kind of charming, he didn't really have the like, this kid's a loser who hangs out in the computer lab energy, you know?
No, I mean, for his first movie,
cool
he already fought like with the Avengers by then.
Exactly. So there's a little bit of a chip on his shoulder, but
he's a different Spider-Man. But that's
in those first few scenes of him like being kind of like bullied, and then when he gets the powers, like the lunchroom scene is iconic. Everyone remembers like, the thing about the first movie is I think I watched it so much as a kid that like I can kind of remember every line, even the way that it's like said, because it's just that movie was so important and it was so cool. You feel those victories when he's like, "Oh, I'm not the nerd anymore. Like, look at this." And another thing,
he's a very human guy. Like you relate to him. You would probably be doing these same things if you attained these powers.
Exactly. I want to say underrated joke. I don't know if you just watch these movies or not, but they live rent-free in my head.
I finished watching the first one today. I watched them all 2 months ago, though. Like, I know the movies.
I just think there's such a funny joke that on a rewatch a few years ago, I just thought was so funny. Because I don't really remember it. But when he first gets his powers, I think he, like, comes out of the room, and Aunt May's like, "Are you like feeling better or something?" Or she says something like, "You look like bigger," and then he like looks down at his dick and he's like, bigger.
Dude, no, I didn't even write a note on that. But dude, I only recognized it this time in the first Deadpool, which is one of my 3 favorite origin stories. It's going to be Deadpool, Iron Man, Spider-Man. I want yours in a second. He, at the end of the movie, tells his girlfriend that he has a super dick.
That's great.
Like but in a way better than not. Oh my God, I'm sorry. We are talking across the country, so we might have a tiny itty bitty bit of lag. If not, I'm just being very rude. But I'm sorry. Do you remember what you were about to say?
No, I said maybe it was in a kind of a reference to like that similar type of joke where it's like, no one ever talks about when you get superpowers if it does anything to your junk, but here we have confirmation that maybe it made Peter Parker's dick bigger and Deadpool's got a super dick. It's all good to know.
I'm so excited to be talking with you again on this podcast about superhero movies.
So here's what I'll say to wrap up Spider-Man 1.
Okay.
I think the rest of the cast is great. Mary Jane, iconic. Kirsten Dunst killed it, and I think, again, in the same vein, that, like, she'll always be Mary Jane to people.
She got saved by Spider-Man 3 times in one movie.
Well, that's fine. I mean, that's what she's there to do. It's just, to be
definite damsel in distress.
But I actually think they do a great job with the romance factor there, because it feels like it builds up in a way that's a bit more patient than, if we look at
Upside Down Kiss was patient to you?
I don't think the Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone thing really, like, I think they were good together because I think they were dating in real life, so there was obvious chemistry.
I felt like a third wheel with them.
Do them any favor, and I think Zendaya and Tom Holland's, like, Mary Jane felt a little bit like it didn't really blossom in the same way. Like, there is like a nice gradual growth to the Mary Jane and Peter Parker in these movies that, hey, that upside down kiss, like that's another iconic moment that most people will always remember. And, it's hot, it's cool, it's
her nipples. Cool, dude, I don't know what's wrong with me. I'm acting so like barbaric today. I'm sorry, man. But her nipples.
Yeah, I mean, we all know it. They're there.
We all know it. It's like that joke of Spider-Man.
To, I think, just sum up how, like, again, the impact of this movie is that with great power comes great responsibility.
Oh, dude, I'm not recording. I'm just kidding.
It's one of the most iconic lines of any Marvel movie.
Start over. Say that again.
With great power comes great responsibility is one of the most iconic movie lines of any superhero movie and just movies in general of the past, like, 3 decades. Like, everyone knows that line. Everyone knows the weight of it. And it so perfectly encapsulates everything that Spider-Man is, like it's one line that sums up the struggle that Peter Parker will deal with forever. It's like, hey, you have these powers now, and with that power, you're going to be responsible for things that'll cause you to, lose the grasp on your social life, on your love life. Like, you have this thing now that you have to deal with, this burden. And we all know that line. It's so powerful that they bring it back up in No Way Home. You know, like it's just one of those.
It's part
things,
of the
honestly,
canon.
The only line that's come close to it is "I am Iron Man," but it's not. Even that isn't quite as powerful as "With great power comes great responsibility," and I think that just goes to show you how much of an impact this Spider-Man movie had on superhero movies and cinema in general. As you can ask anybody on the street, hey, with great power comes great responsibility, they'll be like, oh yeah, Spider-Man. You know, like they know that it is in the lexicon of like, this is superhero at its peak.
Spider-Man Raimi trilogy paved the way for Iron Man and how iconic it got. Did. And if you watch each one of those movies, Iron Man 1, Spider-Man 1, side by side, you're going to have a really nice night. Like they're both very good origin movies. Do you have any other origin superhero movie that would even come close to this?
I don't think so. I really have to think it over.
Yeah.
I do really like. It's funny because I kind of think of the first one that comes to mind is Into the Spider-Verse, because I think Miles Morales' journey in that movie is really cool, because it's something that we're familiar with the origin, but it flips it in a way that is really touching, and I think it's fascinating because he's kind of like following in the footsteps of Peter Parker, and so there's already this level of like, I'm going to get compared to this guy, and so the origin story of Miles Morales is in direct comparison of Peter Parker, but they take it in an interesting direction. That I think that movie is so sweet. I think that movie is like the love letter to this Spider-Man trilogy.
You're so right. I love your take on that, man. I couldn't agree with you more. And they do kind of do a lot of nods to the Spider-Man trilogy in that movie. They do the train thing. They do the part where the car runs through gets thrown at them, him and Mary Jane through the window. And then you see him crying in a bathtub. And it's like, my heart. I started crying a little bit, dude.
It's funny that you asked me about the origin story stuff, because that's a perfect segue into Spider-Man 2.
Perfect.
Because I think Spider-Man 2 is the best superhero movie ever made. Maybe the Incredibles might be up there, like right next to it in my mind. But I think Spider-Man 2 is just the perfect superhero movie.
Incredibles coming to Fortnite.
Spider-Man movie.
Yeah, it is.
It's like I said, it's my favorite superhero movie ever. And I think what it has going for it that makes it so special is that it has the freedom of no longer having to be an origin story. So it gets to tell a story that's a little bit more unique, and it gets to explore more of what superhero movies can do when you no longer have to explain how the person got their powers. It's like, hey, he has powers. Here's what, now we're in his life as Spider-Man 100%. The first movie, it's like, he's learning to become Spider-Man. The second movie, hey, you're Spider-Man. This is your life now. And it just elevates on everything that the first movie did. The villain is so great. I mean, what an crazy follow-up to have to do Willem Dafoe, to have to follow Willem Dafoe's Green Goblin.
How would they do it? How did they,
as Doc Ock is so good. He brings so much charm and humanity to that character, who even as a kid, I was like, Doc Ock is kind of silly. He's a tentacle robot guy, LOL. But he makes it so compelling, and I think it was so smart to make him Peter's friend in the real world, because it makes everything that happens so much more devastating.
I love that. And I love the way
it's so iconic. Every moment in that movie just lands perfectly. Like I said, it's the first movie is so good. This movie just was we learned so much from making that. We're gonna make an even better movie. All the characters feel more developed.
It's the best Spider-Man movie, I think. Like you said, it's
incredible.
It's literally for the exact reason you said. You took the words right out of my mouth. He's already a superhero from the start, and he's got a lot more at stake. I don't know. I think Alfred Molina is his name, right?
Yeah.
He is so iconic in his role, and the best part about these movies is they give you a first-hand perspective of the villains, and give you a liking for them, because like you said, he becomes Peter's friend first, and Peter witnesses exactly how he turned into this to this guy. And I forget at which point. I think it's the end of Spider-Man 2 that he reveals his identity to Doc Ock. Am I wrong?
No, Doc Ock figures it out like probably about like 2/3 into the movie, because then he kidnaps Aunt May.
Oh,
Save Aunt May because he knows that. But at the same time, those nanobots are like starting to mess up his brain. So he's becoming evil, and he's trying to lure out Peter Parker, who he knows is Spider-Man.
oh my God! I don't think they're nanobots in his brain. I think it's just like a needle stuck to his spine.
Yeah, it's like the needle thing. Sorry, it's like the whatever.
The nanobots thing creeps me out, man. I don't like that. I don't like that.
The evil chip in his spine, but
scary.
Yeah, I mean, what it does so well is that, again, the origin stuff is out of the way, and it highlights what makes Spider-Man a compelling character. It's that he has to make decisions that often come to bite him in the ass. You know, he's living in a crummy apartment. He keeps having to like dodge Mary Jane because there's lives on the line, right?
Him not like, going to the musical, like it's like go to the musical.
It hurts to watch because it's like, oh my God, Peter, like you gotta just be a boyfriend. You gotta do what's right. Like you don't want to lose her, but you understand that like this is the with great power becomes responsibility. You have to make the sacrifices now. There's lives on the line. There's people that need you, and every moment you're not out there, you know, it's. People will die and suffer. It's like this. It just captures that energy so well. The train scene, like
yes!
I think there's some. You know, I know there's some people that feel like these movies might be a little campy or a little bit like
I don't know.
Like,
listen to those people. I should turn
like,
the phone off.
I'm trying to think of the right word for it, but I think that the energy
they're a little cheesy, comic-y. They're comic-y. It's a comic book movie. It's very
and I think they excel at matching that comic energy in a way that feels so genuine that like when the train thing happens, some people might take it as like, oh, it's kind of corny, but I think it's just the perfect amount of energy there where it's like he's just a kid and like this realization that like this kid is going out there every day to save lives, and the way that these people just take care of him in that moment. It's beautiful. They don't take off his mask and be like, that's Peter Parker. They're generally like, God, like this kid's doing what's right. Like it's just
a kid. That one guy said.
The emotional core of those movies is so good. The tone of Spider-Man 2, I think, is absolutely perfect.
The train fight.
Superhero movies it's exactly what superhero movies should be, where it's like, look, these people are going around in costumes fighting other costumed villains, and it's kind of silly. So let's lean into that in a way that feels genuine, and it's like there's a heart to this stuff, and I think Spider-Man 2 just encapsulates that.
You just got casted as the second maybe host of Marvel Maniac. I like the way you're kind of running this show, and I'm not in disagreement with it. I love it because it shows how much you love the movie. I love the movies equally, and everything you say, I just want to say yes, yeah, oh yeah, fuck yeah, and like I'm trying so hard not to talk and interject, but like also you're very into it. So if I try and say something, it's hard because you're like very into what you're saying.
Yeah,
and that's okay because you're locked in. You love the movies. It's genuine. I love that. I apologize for talking over you at any time, man.
No, you're good, man. It's a discussion, you know, and we're on the phone. You know, there's bound to be some interference between one another, but again, I think that just pretty much sums up everything that I feel about the second movie. I think it just elevates everything that the first one did. Every character gets a little bit more like grounded in a way that like Mary Jane is doing her thing that feels like unique to her. Even Harry feels like more developed, and I like what they do with him in this movie.
He learns the truth about who Spider-Man is, so it's
the perfect superhero movie. It's the best Spider-Man movie, and I will always love it. It has such a special place in my heart that
I could tell, man. I could tell you really love these movies.
Still holds
I love
up.
them
too. I had the Lego sets, the video game, everything was so cool. Everything that came from that was just like, hell yeah. Spider-Man's the best, and he'll always be the best.
Hell yeah. And that Spider-Man 2 game was iconic, man.
It was. It was the best Spider-Man game ever to that point because it was the first game you could like roam around the city and like
swing,
fly around. It was great.
Fly and travel.
I feel like I knew kids who didn't even play video games that got that game and were like, "Oh yeah."
Like, it's so, awesome. Dude. That's why they made the new ones very much based off of that game. You know, I can't wait.
Without a doubt.
I can't wait to play Spider-Man 2. It's not on PC yet. Nobody ever. Don't you just dare spoil me out there.
Yeah, be careful.
I got so close a good couple of times. Screen Crush even goes into like the story sometimes. It's probably a very good game. This episode is now revolved around this interview, and it makes me happy because I get to talk to you about all these movies that I'm like thinking of. What am I gonna have to say? And Dustin, you are like the Spider-Man master. Like, this is the perfect episode to have you on, even though you're gonna be on a lot.
Yeah, I will. I'm happy to be here whenever you're doing something, and I feel like I have some input to add. And I think
you see my secret list.
Let's get into the nitty gritty. Let's talk about Spider-Man 3.
All right, let's get to that. Now, let me just record a competent part by me. Let's move to Spider-Man 3 now. My idea.
Yeah. Yes. Thanks. Great idea, Eric.
Underrated.
I think Spider-Man 3 iconically gets a pretty bad rap.
It does.
It's definitely the weakest of the three, and I feel like even when I was a kid, I felt that. I felt a little bit like, what is this? This feels just a little off from what was the best Spider-Man movie ever.
Yeah, even as a kid, we were like, this is overambitious.
yeah, a little bit. But then as I've rewatched it a few times, like in my adult life, I find it to be just such a fun movie. Like, it's still very charming. It's very silly, but it's never taking itself to a point. It never takes itself seriously to a point where you can't recognize that, like, it's going for silliness.
He's got a big ego. The best way
to talk about that is with, like, cool emo Peter Parker. I think as a kid, I was like, this is so lame. Like, look at him. He's such a loser. And it felt, like, cringy. But now when I watch it, I think it's hilarious. It's so funny what they're doing because they're trying to showcase Peter Parker is still a nerd at his core, and him trying to be cool translates into this.
I love that.
Cool. That it's hilarious. Like his little dance, him trying to be like smooth with the ladies and it's just not landing. It's so funny. It's such an enjoyable like laugh that you can like. I don't know. I just
but wait. The most disgusting part of this fucking movie about him being this emo asshole is when he goes to Mary Jane's place of work on a date and dances. And what? That is like emotional villain, like an emotional villain right there.
No, he's trying to show off.
You can't make up for that. Like, I was like, what are you doing, dude?
Exactly. I don't think we're definitely not even supposed to be rooting for him at that time. So I think.
And let's just talk about how in a movie with 3 supervillains, we're talking about the characters and their stories, and not the superhero aspect of it. This movie was good. They paced it right. They did.
I do know a little bit behind the scenes stuff that like Sam Raimi
didn't
want to include Venom in this movie.
Yep.
He planned on it mostly being Sandman and the Hobgoblin, or I guess he's still just the Green Goblin, but he planned on it mostly just being Harry and Sandman. I think at one point there was talks of him trying to do Sinister Six or something, but for the most part, I just know that Venom was kind of like a Sony, like, hey, Venom has to be in this.
Yeah,
so
I
do think
always liked
it. If you rewatch it, that feels like the weakest element is the Topher Grace Venom stuff. I don't even dislike Topher Grace as Eddie Brock. I think that's a fun casting choice.
Aged like wine for me, the movie.
It just feels shoehorned in when the Sandman stuff feels a bit more developed and the Harry stuff has been being developed over the past 3 movies.
It's not as hard
like
for them to do that.
Wasted. So even as a kid, I was kind of like, well, Venom is so cool. He's such an iconic character in the video games and any comics that I've read. There should just be a movie about Venom. Why are we shooting him in when there's so much going on?
Spider-Man 4 could have been Venom.
Like Sam Raimi or, the actor involved in it. I just feel like, it's a perfect example of studio meddling when maybe they should have just let this guy, who made 2 great movies, make another movie that he wanted to make.
This movie was at the time the most expensive movie ever made.
Really? I'm not surprised to hear that.
Oh, I remember at the time hearing it.
Yeah.
But I'm sure other movies like, I don't know, Infinity War probably beat the shit out of that record. One of my favorite parts of that movie, there's a couple really cool sequences, but like the part with the crane falling down and him having to like fly through the sky and against debris and saving Gwen Stacy, like another problem that doesn't have to do with supervillains. They do a lot in this fucking movie, but it didn't bother me when I was younger, and it doesn't bother me now because they basically treat you in this movie, the audience, like Spider-Man by now. We're gonna have him ramp up the action a little bit here.
There was a little bit of that, right? Like, we just came off of the success of these first two movies. We need to do a bigger and better. 3 villains, Spider-Man 3, bigger, stronger, better. And
always, yeah.
I don't think that was the best idea because, again, when Spider-Man, I think, is at his best is when his stories feel a bit more personal and grounded. And, if we just explore, like, the Sandman side of things, Sandman is supposed to be, like, a regular villain, a villain that Spider-Man would just normally, like, beat up in a few hits and leave to be arrested. We have this guy who, has, like, a family on the line. He's doing stuff. He's doing bad things because he needs to take care of his family. And I think there's an interesting thing to explore there that the movie doesn't get to as much, where if Peter Parker had to deal with, like, why do villains do what they do? Why does, like, an average Joe crook rob and, steal? It's because, he might have a family to take care of. It's a compelling thing, and I think to try to tie it into the Uncle Ben origin story feels a little bit, like, ham-fisted at times. Like,
I'm sold on it by now.
I never needed that, but I understand that, like, that's an interesting story to look into.
I didn't like it.
Like, hey, Peter, here's the guy that started all this. Right?
I didn't like it at first, but I learned to really like what they did with that to bring him in, and how they did a flashback to show it.
Yeah, it's like, it feels weird. Like, again, I don't know if it was the best thing in the world, but if you're just trying to look at it from a storytelling point, and with the idea that, like, Peter is at his lowest in this movie, he's lost. He's had, like, the consequences of being Spider-Man. Things with Mary Jane aren't going great. He doesn't have a great social life. He doesn't have a great life outside of being Spider-Man. And he's pissed about it, as anyone would be, right? Like, he wants to be able to live a life, and, it's taking its toll, which is, like, why the dark Spider-Man stuff is interesting with, like, the symbiote turning his suit black. Like, all that, I think, ties in nicely with the idea that, like, he's going to have a moment where he can literally kill the guy that took Uncle Ben from him.
Iconic moment is when he pushes the guy, the Sandman, when he's, like, searching for him in the Venom suit, and he pushes his face against the moving train, and, like, his face starts to, like, disappear into sand.
Yeah.
That is, like, what the hell? That time especially, I was like, that is gnarly.
And it, like, again, it all comes together in a way where, like, Peter realizes that, like, this will always, like, there is a cost to him being the superhero, and he's not going to kill this guy, even though he has all this anger towards him, like, it's a human moment that I think is underscored because of the mess that movie can be at times. But at the end of the day, if it was just focused on Sandman and Harry and, like, the consequences of being Spider-Man, and also being distraught with, like, what loss has followed him because he is Spider-Man, I think all those pieces make Spider-Man 3 a bit more interesting on a rewatch. And I think knowing that that's the last time we see Tobey Maguire Spider-Man, and then going into No Way Home.
Yeah, I had to talk to you about that.
The lessons that he's learned being Spider-Man, like, he's wiser from all these experiences. And I like how the Tobey Maguire in No Way Home carries that with him. Like, he knows how rough it is. He knows what being Spider-Man takes from a person, because he has lost, and he has had those dark moments of, like, I want to kill this person, and he wanted to kill Sandman, he wanted to kill all these people, but he doesn't, and he stops Tom Holland
from making a big mistake too,
because he's like, look, like, this isn't who you are, and you don't want to do this. And it's great. I think
he's
Spider-Man 3,
too calm in that movie, I'm realizing.
Yeah,
he's too calm in that.
Though, like, if you watch it since No Way Home, you see, like, damn, they really, they really did kind of try to follow where that Spider-Man would be in his life later on. And, like,
he's in a different suit. He's in, like, a black suit, black and right? Am I wrong? Is he in a black and red suit similar to Tom Holland's? Isn't he? Or no?
No, he's in his
original.
Like, yeah, he's in the one from those movies.
I'm gonna have to look into that, man. I swear to God, he was in a black kid.
You know what? Don't quote me on it, but I'm pretty sure they tried to have them all in their, like, most iconic suits.
True, so you can tell them apart.
Yeah, exactly.
I love the different structures and builds that these gentlemen have, these Spider-Men, because you could totally see Andrew Garfield, like, by his his body, and you know who Tobey is because you watched him kick ass in the OG trilogy, and then you see Tom Holland, and we know him a lot by then.
Yeah.
So they bring these characters back into the fold. Are you done with Spider-Man 3?
I think so. I don't know if you have any closing notes on it.
You know, well, I loved it, and I think it deserved another movie. Sam Raimi wanted to do, but he wanted Spider-Man to fight the Lizard, and that was kind of pushed to the Amazing Spider-Man, which is okay,
right.
But I really think that there needed to be another movie. He fucked up with Mary Jane so bad in that movie. I want to see like that next level. Like, are they gonna have a baby? Like, I want to see like a slower movie to calm it down after the like crazy ride of Spider-Man 3. Do you think Do you think there's still a possibility that we get that movie?
I don't know. I've heard talks. I'm sure you've seen the potential, like Sam Raimi saying, like, I'd do it, and I know Sony.
Yeah, I think I did. That's why I'm so excited.
Like, hey, we still own the rights to this character. They're making all their villain movies.
Can Sony not use Spidey?
The Hunter.
Can Sony not use Spidey? Because like
at this point, I would say I don't need one. Okay, like I do think that this trilogy stands on its own. Because again, Spider-Man movies, like Spider-Man, like story doesn't ever need to have like an ending point where it's like, and then Peter Parker like lived with Mary Jane and had kids and everything. Like his life continues no matter what we're watching. So I never
cut away to Into the Spider-Verse Peter or Across the Spider-Verse Peter with his baby the whole movie.
Yeah, so cute. Like, and I think No Way Home does provide a sense of closure for that trilogy in a way that I didn't think we would ever get. And because we got it, I don't need another Spider-Man from Sam Raimi or Tobey Maguire. I think these three have, stood the test of time.
Well, you might be upset about what I'm about to tell you.
What's that?
You might be a little upset about what I'm about to tell you.
No, I mean...
You might have heard this, too. That Spider-Man 4 with Tom Holland is happening. It's apparently rumored to be between the next Avengers movies and on Battleworld with prominently Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield.
Wow.
It's like, it's kind of happening, I think.
But that's not Spider-Man 4. That's Tom Holland's Spider-Man 4. You know what I mean?
Yeah, dude. But it's not really that once they start bringing him into all the movies. Like, he's his own character that has this history. It's kind of like Tony Stark in the Avengers at this point. At one point, like, he stopped being Iron Man in Iron Man movies, and the Iron Man movies are really majorly the Avengers movies where we get all of his story. I think Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield can come back in a good way. I hope it's not too shoehorned. They better make it fucking awesome. Because I don't want them to ruin those characters. They did a decent job at No Way Home of like not tarnishing the legacy of those characters.
Like overstaying their welcome in a way.
The thing they did with Andrew Garfield, like I almost cried. The fact that they actually put a cap on that story, like, oh, that hit me in the feels, man. That did hit me in the feels. I was there for that. That was one of the weirdest endings to a Spider-Man movie.
Great performance in that movie from him. They all brought their A game for that return, and again, I think I know No Way Home can be a bit of like a nostalgia, like, pour, but I think they towed that line very well, and they gave everyone like just the right amount of time to feel like, yep, this is exactly what they needed to do with this, and it's perfect. Like, I don't need that to be the next Spider-Man. I actually, if you ask me right now, what would the ideal Tom Holland
street level Spider-Man?
Spider-4? It should be street level Parker. Yeah, it should be like
against Kingpin.
I think what's the first one? Homecoming is my favorite of the Tom Holland trilogy.
I love that movie. What a sweet movie! Because it feels so
cozy and like just more or less, what Tony says. You're friendly neighborhood Spider-Man.
I love how he says, he's like, can't you be more of a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man? Like, I love that. I love that.
So I would like, because, I know we kind of got a reset on his story at the end of No Way Home. I would kind of like a fourth one that feels a bit more like him getting back into the swing of things.
He's getting a second trilogy. I'm like almost positive.
Right, and if they want to follow that format of the first one in a way, I think the first one being a bit more grounded and just like slice of life.
Cut to Battle World with all the Spider-Man.
Yeah, Battle World is quite the leap. But at this point, Marvel is in the middle of their multiverse stuff. That if that's what they think the best story is, like, hey, I'm here for it.
We got the Russos. We got RDJ. I think we're going to start to nestle now. Yeah. I have a good feeling about Captain America, Brave New World. A really good feeling about it. Just from the small things I've seen, like the clips of the Red Hulk. I mean, oh my goodness, I'm so excited. They don't want to spoil anything for you. We're talking more Marvel stuff now. But, let's bring it around back to the trilogy as a whole. What a great superhero story. Years before the MCU even came to be. Set the golden standard. What else? Do you have anything to say? Like final thoughts on the OG Spider-Man, Tobey Maguire, Sam Raimi trilogy?
I think I've gotten most of what I wanted to say out. It's Spider-Man 1 and 2. The whole trilogy is great. The first one just again set the stage for every superhero movie and the standard for it. Spider-Man 2, best superhero movie ever, best Spider-Man movie ever, and I just love them so much. I'm glad you're covering them.
I mean, this is the dude. You are the show. You've made this show. You've made this episode for me. I love it. I love having a longer talk with you about this movie. It doesn't always have to be this long of a conversation, but it really, it's really good to hear your thoughts. In my mind,
I was like, it'll only be like 15, 20 minutes, and now here we are at almost 45 minutes.
That's all right, man. If you got the time, it's great.
I haven't done anything differently because I knew I had some things to say. I think it just goes to show how important these movies are to our generation, probably. And, I think there's possibilities for others to feel the same way even later on. But I love that some people have this feeling for Tom Holland's Spider-Man movies, and like
I get it. I love Spider-Man. He might be moving towards favorite status because of how much we've had of him so far.
Yeah, and I think that makes a lot of sense. I think he brings... what my favorite thing about Tom Holland is that he doesn't just feel like he's doing Tobey Maguire as Spider-Man again. He's doing his own thing, and I appreciate that. He's like Spider-Man for the new generation in a lot of ways. So I look forward to seeing where they go with him.
Well, they could have ended it with the last one, but that would have sucked. Like, we need some follow up.
Yeah, it would have been. But at the same time, if they ended it there, it would be the exact thing that Spider-Man does the best, which is like. There's a cost. There's a cost to being a superhero. There's a cost to being Spider-Man, and the cost is like your friends, your loved ones will be in danger. Like, it highlights just everything.
That's what I love about this first
compelling character.
The first trilogy, it's a slow burn towards that realization, towards a moment of shock. Like, we see Uncle Ben die maybe 35, 40 minutes into the movie. I mean, I gotta be wrong about that. Probably 20, 25 minutes into the movie, but he takes the lesson. Never mind. I don't know what to say. And I was gonna be like, he takes the lessons from Uncle Ben seriously, so he's a better Spider-Man for it. No, just that moment where he lets the guy pass him, and that, God, don't let him go, man. Don't let him go. Yeah. But every time for me too. Like,
he's just a kid.
Yeah, I refuse to see the part where that's my problem. Rent. Sorry, I'm trying to do all the memes. Rent.
You're good. I'm so happy to have joined you on this podcast, Eric. Thank you for having me.
This is your podcast now.
Next discussion.
I'm giving you the keys.
You give me the keys. Maybe it'll be Werewolf by Night, but maybe something in between that and the.
No, dude, you're coming back in 2 weeks after I talk to TJ. That's why I said 10 to 15 minutes so I can get you guys on every other fucking episode. I'm not.
I mean, you know what? In all fairness, we're talking about 3 movies. It's been 45 minutes, so 15 minutes a movie. That's pretty good.
If you don't want to do it, tell me later, but I will ask you. I really will.
Just the next time, I'll try to be a little bit more brief with what I'm saying. But
I'd say go with the flow.
It makes sense that we took a little bit longer.
You're in your comfort zone, and you're with me, and I told you go with the flow. Go with the flow. Honestly, you going off like that, it gets people excited. It gets me excited when you were talking about your points, what it meant to you when you were growing up. Like, I feel exactly the same. I saw them in theaters, and your perspective on it's very fresh because this show is always just me. So to hear your perspective and see where we line up and to see what we hope for, like, in the future, the Secret Wars or whatever, it's just cool, man. Like, we can both have different favorite Spider-Men, but yet they come together and make more movies. So as long as it doesn't feel like a cash grab, which it almost has at points. Like, there's one thing I'll never talk about on the show, and it's Secret Invasion. And it's just like that's
you don't talk about Secret Invasion.
Yeah, like, honestly, I never disliked anything publicly on this podcast. I didn't like Secret Invasion. I'm sad about it, and I may do an episode on why it would have made a better Avengers movie.
Yeah, I think that could be an interesting angle to cover that.
Yeah, I kind of could have been.
Time, I know everyone has covered it,
Yeah, well, we're not everyone. We're just our own little world. I can't look at everyone else.
Yeah, and you're the Marvel Maniac, so you have to cover everything Marvel.
Well, we're jumping all over the sacred timeline these next, 50 episodes or so. We're climbing to 100 episodes. I'm gonna do it if it takes me dying to do it. We're getting to 100. This is episode 75. Wait. I can't wait to. Dustin, you've been you've been a great guest, and I'm sorry for prolonging our goodbye. I'll probably cut this up a little bit, but thank you so much, and your input is greatly appreciated, my friend.
Of course, man. Thanks for having me. I look forward to listening to the episode, and I'll talk to you soon, buddy. Oh, and I'm always looking at this beautiful Thanos pop figure that's like rainbowy that Dustin got me for Christmas last year, and I'm definitely going to get you something this year. I don't know what it'll be, but that little thing, I feel like it reminds me of you, and like, you're one of my BFFs, so like I get excited about Marvel when I look at that thing, and I miss you. I knew you'd love it.
Well, there you have it. That was Dustin Baker, my good buddy, talking about the Sam Raimi Spider-Man trilogy. It's an iconic trilogy. It ages great. Some of the CGI looks like not perfect, but aside from that, I love those movies. And the fact that I can bring them into this podcast now because Tobey Maguire was, spoiler alert, in Spider-Man No Way Home, he's part of the MCU now. So we have to talk about it. Send me any Spider-Man theories at marvelmaniacpod@gmail.com. Find us on all your favorite social networking platforms: Instagram, Twitter, formerly Twitter, X, and TikTok. Marvel Maniac Pod. We don't have a lot of new content going up on them yet, but since the podcast is coming back, we're going to start getting all that together. Also, patreon.com/Marvel Maniac. And that is it. Don't become a Patreon yet. I'm just going to tell you. We have it, but don't do it yet. We'll make the Patreon more of a thing when I'm back in motion here. I don't want any patrons. I want everyone to feel like they don't need to put money down to enjoy a podcast right now. I just want you to enjoy the podcast. And it was a lot of fun this episode. I'm having a lot of fun talking to my friends about the stuff instead of doing my episodes completely solo. So that really helps me get really engaged and really more excited. Shared excitement is fantastic. That's why when we go into these movies, and by all means, rate the show, thumbs up the show, whatever you can do to support the show. That little bit goes a very long way. Marvel movies are the only ones where I'm cheering with a crowd when Captain America brings Thor's hammer to his helm and kicks Thanos' ass. Like, moments like that, and the theater goes wild. Like, we have a crowd goes wild audience at Marvel, and I think it's going in a very good direction. Before I overstay my welcome, everybody have a great day, week, month. We'll talk to you next time, and until then, Avengers, disassemble.